Thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill, and I've met a lot of you, but I am the Assistant Director for Graduate Career Education at the Division of Career Pathways. First of all, housekeeping. I'll send the slide deck and links to some resources after the presentation, so don't feel like you have to take copious notes, and feel free to stop and ask questions at any time. I know Lauren might monitor the chat, or you could just, you could just yell out and tell me you have questions. So just really quickly, the image you see on your screen, does anybody know where that is? Anybody want to take a guess?
Looks like Grand Canyon to me, or Bryce.
Ding, 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 ding. Yes, it's the Grand Canyon. It's the north rim of the Grand Canyon. It's called Cape Royal, and it's this was a sunset. And I don't know if you can see, but there's rain. There's rain clouds, and it's raining in part of the Grand Canyon and sunny in another part. We just got back last week, and I thought it was so beautiful. I wanted to share this with you. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we're going to talk about the what, when, how, and why of salary negotiation. You're going to learn why it's crucial to your career, what it looks like, how and when to start the process, the difference between a dialogue and a demand, and then what can be negotiated, not just salary, but benefits too. And hopefully you'll walk away with some resources to help you successfully earn what you learn. So we're going to start by playing a quick game of Would You Rather. Using the chat box, I'd like you to use a heart emoji if you would prefer unlimited vacation days in your job, or a thumb emoji if you prefer 3 weeks of vacation and $5,000 sign-on bonus. Let's see where we are. Okay, interesting. Okay, we have some thumbs, we have some hearts. It looks like we have some people that aren't responding, but that's okay. So I will tell you, be careful what you wish for, because unlimited vacation days sounds amazing, but you don't know what your workload's going to be like when you join a company or an organization or an institution. So you have no way of knowing whether you can take those vacation days. However, if you're guaranteeing a $5,000 sign-on bonus, usually it's in your employment agreement, which is a binding, it's not a contract, but it's legally binding. So think about that. Here's another one. Would you rather use a heart emoji if you would rather have yoga classes and free food in the office, or a thumbs up if you would prefer 100% remote work? Let's see what we got. Okay, kind of split here. Okay, again, as someone who is social, I will tell you, I like going to the office, but not every day. I've worked in this like free meal perk environment before, and the implied expectation was that I would work through lunch and stay later, which for me personally was not a healthy culture. It got old really fast. So you always want to think about the expectations behind the benefits. Let's do one more. So in the chat, use a heart emoji if you would rather have a $90,000 base salary, or a thumbs up if you prefer 60K with 40K in stock options. Okay, we got a lot of heart emojis. Good. Yeah. Me personally, I would take the 90K base salary, because this is a private startup. And if the startup doesn't go public, you don't get those $40,000. And there are even more complications. They could be qualified or unqualified stock options, meaning there are certain limitations on them. So you always want to, well, my advice is to try to think about all the possibilities when you're considering benefits. And most of these benefits can be negotiated in some form. But before we go there, I kind of want to share some background. So the gender pay gap, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, is the way we describe the inequality in what non-Hispanic white men and women are paid nationally. And the gender pay gap exists in just about every line of work at every educational level and at various ages. So don't think that because you're going to have a PhD that makes you immune to this. If you look at the table, it shows women's wages, including part-time and seasonal workers, as a percentage of non-Hispanic white men's wages. That means that for example, Lauren, well, maybe not Lauren, for me, I would earn 74 cents on the dollar that every white man earned. And if you notice, women of color are disproportionately affected by the pay gap. However, there's some new data starting to be published that shows there's a slight close in the gap, especially for Asian women. However, at the rate of progress, what do you guys think? When will the gender pay gap be closed? Anybody have a guess? And feel free to say it out because my chat is on the other screen.
Hi, Jill. This is Natalie. I'm a little cynical. I'm not sure it'll ever be fully closed, but I'd love to be proven wrong.
Okay, that's a great point, Natalie. Thank you for sharing. According to statistics and according to the website that's the Association for American University Women, the gender pay gap won't close until 2088, assuming things stay the same. And as you guys know, there's many contributing factors to the size of the gap. Some of them include fewer hours, reduced job tenure, gender segregation, we all know about, bias against women in leadership, parenthood. I could go on and on. So this line graph shows the difference between men and women's earnings over the last 62 years. And I kind of wanted to show you, and then Natalie, hopefully this gives you a little optimism, that the gap is shrinking, but it's not equal. So we're moving forward, but not at the rate we should be. We're doing our best, but it's not good enough. And then here's another one from the Census Bureau, and this is women, the percentage of women in a specific occupation and their earnings. And what it was telling to me is that even in stereotypically female-dominated industries, such as childcare, nursing, men still make more than women. And you'll know that because the purple dots indicate the women's salary and the green dots indicate the men's salary. So that's kind of a bummer. To put some context around these graphs, the lifetime losses for women are staggering. On average, women would lose $406,760 over the course of a 40-year career compared to white men. African American would lose $946,120, and then Latinas is over 1.1 million, 1.135, $440,000 to be exact. So how does this affect you? I want to know what your reaction to this is. How does this make you feel? Anybody have any thoughts they want to share? You can also put them in the chat if you'd like. Come on, I know you guys have feelings about this. Sad. Lauren is sad, sad face. Yeah, it's pretty sad. I'm also in a same gender relationship. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that, Sydney. Yes. This is a family issue. It's a friend issue. It's an issue for everybody. And it's not just about women, non-binary and straight women. The gender wage gap is only one of many wage gaps that exist. You know, there are wage gaps across different races, ethnicities, disabilities, you name it, there's wage gaps. And there is a way to kind of help to decrease the wage gap. And that is to know the statistics by attending workshops like this one and reading about it, by encouraging women to value their worth and negotiate and ask for raises or promotions, to be an advocate for women in the workplace. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this. Has anyone heard about Equal Pay Day? I found this out when I was doing research for this presentation. It's kind of interesting. So Equal Pay Day it happens once a year. And it's a Tuesday in March, and it's basically a way of raising awareness of the gender pay gap. What it is this specific day symbolizes how far into the year women must work to earn what men earned the previous year. There are some articles that I'm going to send you guys afterwards that talk about how this affects men, how this affects women, how this affects same-sex relationships, how this affects different races, so that you can advocate. So with this in mind, what do you see as your biggest challenge for negotiating strategy? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to write them in the chat. I know there are some because I read your questions. I think I feel awkward asking for the higher end if the range is so large. Okay. Not crossing the line. How do you negotiate? These are all great questions. And we're going to talk about these. And it is, negotiating is not a natural thing. It's not part of what we're wired to do. It's very awkward. And I think it's something you have to learn how to do. You have to embrace the awkward, kind of like networking. And we'll talk about this more. Do you want to get a contract first before you negotiate? Good question. The job market is not great right now. Is it worth risking the job? That's a great question. And that the answer to that we'll discuss, but negotiation typically doesn't happen until you already have an offer. And we'll talk about that more. Lack of experience. I feel international students are bound to a work visa, which affects negotiation strategy. Great point, Atish. These are all good points. Okay. So the first step in preparing to negotiate is really to know your value. How do you confidently and articulately share the value that you bring and the contribution you're going to make in your position in a way that really resonates with an employer, with your supervisor, with the hiring manager? How many of us are comfortable talking about our accomplishments? We already said that it's not very natural. There might even be cultural norms in how you were raised that make this much more difficult. I know I grew up in the South, and salary and money was something that was taboo. We didn't talk about it. And women were, unfortunately taught, really not to accept the status quo, basically. So it requires kind of retraining your brain to think about this differently. So let's talk about the value of your brand. As you begin your career, which some of you are doing, you may not think you have a lot of experiences, but I don't want you to underestimate your doctorate, because this is an experience. This is the same thing as a full-time job. It's actually more, and people who haven't gotten a doctorate may not understand. Employers, though, they're looking for this kind of experience. They want transferable skills. They want you to be able to communicate, problem solve, collaborate, do a lot of things like that. And even if you've never had a job before and you've just gone straight from undergrad to grad school, you still have a lot of these skills just based on what you've done at UCI and other places. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to take a minute and identify, kind of articulate some of your skills and accomplishments and experiences. And this exercise is worthwhile because you also might do this or may have already done this in your resume. So take about 2 minutes just to write those things down. And if you're finished, you can put a thumbs up or something in your, as a reaction, so I know you're ready to kind of move on, because we're gonna use your skills and experiences. Okay. So keep going if you're still working. What I want you to do is think about one thing that you've written down and what you did to make this happen. So what role did you play? And what were some of the positive results? Think about if you can quantify anything. I'm sure you can. We're always talking about quantify your accomplishments on your resume. And when you think about the thing, I'd like you to put it together in a statement. So, for example, as a result of my effort to do X, I have achieved Y, which provided the following specific benefits to the organizations. And then you're going to tell what the benefits. So, I accomplished accomplishments using my skills, which benefited my organization by results. This is a value statement, and it's how you share your skills and accomplishments in an objective, data-driven, non-emotional way. And it's really tailored to the job you're seeking, sorry. Here's an example of a value statement. I led a marketing campaign to promote our mentorship program on campus using my leadership, communications, and skills, which led to a 45% increase in event attendance and a 30% increase in membership in 6 months. So the accomplishment is leading the market campaign. The skills I used are leadership and communications. And then the results or the outcomes are the increase in event attendance, and a 30% increase in membership. And here's another one. I developed a training program for new hires using my project management and leadership experience. That benefited our company by decreasing turnover by 32%, improving office culture, and saving the company an average of $22,000 a year in onboarding costs. Questions about this? I'm sure you all have great examples of value statements, and that is why we're going to do a quick activity. I would like you to develop your own value statement. You can use this slide. So you've already kind of written down some of your accomplishments, skills, and strengths. But now I want you to do is put it together in a value statement. And here's kind of an example. As a result of my effort to do blank, I have achieved blank, which provided the following specific benefits to the organization blank. And after you've finished, I might ask for some volunteers to read their value statement. Does anybody want to volunteer to read theirs? Maybe you haven't had enough time to write it down, but it would be great if we had some volunteers. Natish, did you want to read yours? Okay, great.
So the background is I'm working towards an internship this summer, and I want to somehow use my internship experience these past 8 weeks to write a value statement. Even for my present employer or future employer. So something that I was thinking of is, as a result of my effort to analyze patient reviews about their sleep apnea therapy, I developed LLM-based tool to analyze reviews, which helps automate the process for 6,000 patients, which can help benefit the organization by understanding the contextual features such as demographic age to provide more personalized sleep apnea therapy in the future.
Awesome. Way to go. Let's give it up for Nitish. That's great. I definitely heard your accomplishment. I heard your skills that you used, and I heard the outcomes, and you quantified 6,000 patients. Thank you, Nitish. That's great. Have you used this? Did you, I couldn't hear the beginning of what you were telling us. Did you use this in your internship?
No, I was just giving context on the values, where the value statement comes from.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Awesome. That's definitely an example that you could use when you're negotiating, especially if you're staying with the same company, the one that we talked about. Natish and I had discussed some interview or some internship opportunities. That's amazing. Anyone else want to share their value statement or want to write it in the chat and I could read it? Your program director says that as you're approaching a career transition, these should become second nature to you. You should be able to share them out whenever and with whoever. Yeah, these are great networking pitches as well. Okay, well, if you decide you want to share, feel free to put it in the chat, or maybe we'll come back to this. So now it's time really to incorporate these values into negotiation strategies. And in order to negotiate, you need to know your bottom line. So let's talk about spending habits. What sorts of things do you all like to spend your money on? I'd love to see you write some of these items in the chat, and I will show you some of mine. I love to go out trying new restaurants and different foods. I love coffee. I have a serious coffee thing going on. I like to do outdoor activities. This is a picture of my husband and my daughter and I when we went fly fishing in Utah a few weeks ago. My dog, we have 2 dogs, so we spend money on our pets, obviously. And then more outdoors. This is a beach. I think this is Butterfly Beach, and you'll notice there's a seal lying on the rocks. So let's see, what do we have here? I see there's a lot of things in the chat. Okay. Clothes, vacation, food and housing, food and rock climbing, cat stuff and new food. Traveling, food, family, shoes and food. Oh, Lila, I love shoes. Mina says cats, rent, groceries, trips. The first 2 aren't liked so much as necessities. Yes, and we'll talk about that because that's part of your budget. Facials, hair, and nails. Same. These are great. Anybody else have anything unique that they'd like to spend their money on? Hobbies or anything? It's important to have hobbies. I know you probably don't have time, but video games, awesome. Very cool. All right. So put a pin in this because we're going to come back to it. So what you need to do to negotiate is you need to understand your target salary. What are the salary ranges in your field or your job type? And they can be all over the place. Salaries differ based on company size, the type of company, whether it's a public or private, the location. You know, a lot of places have a higher cost of living. California and New York probably are the most expensive places in the country like right now, but I did read an article that a lot of these towns that people have moved to or that people relocated to during COVID have become super expensive. Places like Nashville and Austin and Chicago. Places even out, in Utah have become really expensive. There's a lot of other things that, really dictate salaries as well. So here are a few of the great resources. PayScale, first of all, can help you estimate your earning potential, and it also has a cost of living calculator. There's reports on some compensation and benefits. I recommend checking that out. That's one of my favorites. Salary.com is another place to do some compensation planning. And you guys know the difference between salary and compensation? Yeah. Salary is like, okay, so your salary is the amount of money that you receive to do a job. Compensation is your salary plus all of the benefits you get. So maybe the things that aren't money, but that are of value that would help bring down your cost of living. So insurance benefits, retirement benefits, things like that. That's all included in your total compensation package, which is part of what you can negotiate. DCP uses Stepping Blocks, which is a database of careers and salaries from college graduates around the country, including UCI. It's based on secondary data, but I do believe that it has some valuable data. It lists the most common employers for UCI grads, as well as some salary ranges for specific occupations. So I didn't put the website, but I'll link to it when I send out the slides so that you have it. Might be fun to check out. The Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics has very detailed wage tables and analysis. I mean, you can find out how much a nuclear technologist in Schenectady, New York would make in 2025 if you go to the US Department of Labor. It's very specific. So if you're looking around, shopping around, I recommend using it. And they actually are pretty up to date, I want to say. They tend to be maybe a year behind, but they're not like the census, which happens every 10 years. So you can count on BLS for the most part. Another place to go is UCI Libraries. Believe it or not, the libraries has an amazing career section. And there are a bunch of websites where you can search for salaries by state, by occupation. You can look at trends, projections, potential growth in salaries and markets. So I definitely recommend checking out this site. You have to be on VPN if you're not on campus, and you have to be on full VPN. You can't just log into VPN, but it's worth it. And then for those of you who might be interested in academic job search, you can go to this website to look at a survey result of faculty compensation. Check that out. And then, of course, there's informational interviews. So there's a very delicate way to ask about salary range questions. You obviously don't want to ask people, what do you make? Even though salary transparency is becoming more common and encouraged, you could say something like, based on my experience and starting in this particular role and field, what range do you think that I could expect to see, or what's reasonable to expect in my first year? And you're probably going to get a range of answers, but I think people will be really honest. So that's actually a great way to find out information. Go directly to the source. Questions about research? Nope. Okay. So now let's go back to those spending habits and budget. So knowing your personal budget can really help you prepare to negotiate and confirm if your target salary is appropriate. And your target salary is going to be based on all that research you just did. You want to plug that salary into your budget and make sure that you're not in the red after you do a budget. It's also a really good idea to estimate your monthly take-home pay after taxes and other deductions. If your budget's greater than your target salary, you really want to re-examine your budget or decide whether or not the job is a realistic fit. Because you're gonna have to make sacrifices if your budget's more, or if you really love spending money on restaurants and travel, then you have to think about what do I need extra every month to do that? And remember, you want to set your salary targets on objective data. Don't think about, oh, I know I can make this much because I read an article on Google that said this is the going rate. Also, just because if your target salary is below, what you need to budget, you should still ask for what you want. Let me say that again. Having a budget below your targeted salary doesn't mean you should decrease what you're willing to accept. You really want to go for your target salary, regardless of whether or not you can make less and still meet your budget. And here are some of the things to consider. I'm sure we all have budgets, some of us more than others. Back in the olden days, they used to have checkbooks where you would have to balance your checkbook every month. Anyone remember checkbooks? Anyone have checkbooks? Yeah, some people. Okay. That was really not fun. So be glad that you're part of the technology generation where you don't have to do a pencil and paper. Here are some of the things you need to think about when you're budgeting. I would say that rent, medical and health benefits, and food are the most expensive and key. Those are the things that you have to have: shelter, food, and healthcare. And those will take up the majority of your budget. So
Jill,
make sure.
share a quick anecdote with this too, since you
Sure,
talked benefits.
sure.
I had a supervisor, was working at K through 12 at the time, and she was working for a school district, and there was a job posted at another school district. It was a lateral move, same position, but it was $10,000 more a year. So she was like, great, I'm going to apply for this. I'm going to just move over, get $10,000 more a year. She got her first paychecks and she was making less per month at this new school district, even though the pay was $10,000 more. And she was like, hold up, something's wrong. They're paying me wrong. But the previous school district covered like almost the entire portion of medical, dental, vision premiums that you have to pay. And the new school district didn't. And so she was paying more than $10,000 more a year in benefits with the new school district. So even though that base salary was higher, she was making less because of what the cost of benefits were at the new district. So really having to also pay attention when you're getting offers, asking for those detailed costs of each of the benefits, not just, oh, medical, dental benefits are included, but what's the cost to me as the employee is really important, because that will mess up your budget if you weren't planning on that. So thanks for letting me interrupt.
Wow, $10,000, that's a lot of money, but medical costs are high, as I'm sure you guys probably have experienced, even though you're in grad school. You have to pay for healthcare, and the better healthcare you have, the more expensive it is. So that's a great anecdote, Lauren, and it pays to shop around and look at your total compensation. Where I thought you were going with that is that you're in a higher tax bracket if you make $10,000 more, which means your taxes are going to be higher, which means your take-home pay is probably going to be less. So that's also something to consider when you're looking at salary and pay. So I have a couple of budget spreadsheets that I'm going to send you. NerdWallet has one for just about every stage of your life. It's like when you're single, when you're married, when you're a homeowner, when you're retired, for children. I recommend that one. Definitely. And then Excel has a personal monthly budget worksheet. That's great. So when you're applying for jobs, you don't want to offer your salary history in initial written applications. Have any of you guys been asked for your salary history? Anyone? Good, good. It is against the law in California. And a lot of state and local governments are enacting laws that ban salary history questions. So you want to make sure you research the equal pay laws of your local government, depending on where you live, before you start thinking about your salary negotiation. If you're responding to a job posting that asks you to send out in a resume and salary history, don't send them what you're making as a TA or as working in a lab. You're going to send them your resume. And if the employer is interested, someone will call and ask for more information. You still shouldn't tell them how much you make. But for now, you can just leave it out of your application. You know, there are employers who probably will not accept your application without these answers, and there's probably online forms that won't let you move forward with the application without inputting a number. So what you could do is consider using your target salary or a salary range. So something like around the mid 80s. And during your interview, delay. This is tricky, but if you get asked questions about salary, you want to deflect the question as much as possible. You don't want to be the first to name a number. Does anyone know why? It puts you in a box. The employers know that they only have to pay you what you have suggested, and they're probably going to make it hard for you to negotiate more. Boxes, they're great. They're made for gifts, not people. So when you get to the point of the interview where you're probably on the short list, you're probably the preferred candidate, you may have someone ask you what your salary range is. And your goal is going to be to have the recruiter to answer with their range first. It may also happen on a phone screen. It's not supposed to, but it might. Legally, you don't have to provide the salary range, but if asked, they should be providing you that information. Here's a question. What if the salary question is on a pre-screening? Okay. You don't have to answer. You can deflect. You can, and I'm going to give you some examples of answers to use. You can say, well, can you tell me what the range for this position is? Or there are other things you could say. You could say, you know, I'd like to learn more about the position before talking about salary. There's several different responses. Okay, Lauren, I had a phone screen, and the very first question she asked was my salary expectation. I was very caught off guard. What did you say, Lauren?
Well, I was inexperienced at that time and I gave a number. And then she was like, oh, well, that's way too high. I don't think that this position is going to be right for you. And that you should be wanting to do this work to make, you know, to make an impact and to do that. And I shouldn't be expecting that high of a salary. And it was a very uncomfortable conversation. And I quickly knew I did not want to work for them either. So they were in their offer, their salary was way below market value of what positions were making for that type of role. So I think that's why because they knew people couldn't really accept that low of a salary, but it did catch me very off guard. It's very uncomfortable, but we got to be prepared that they're going to ask you questions about it in the application, right? So you have starts even then.
Yeah. So here's some examples. I'd like to learn more about the role before I set my salary expectations. I'd like to see if I'm a good fit first before we discuss salary. I'd rather talk about that after you've made me a job offer. Or what do you usually pay someone in this position? I might say, what is your typical compensation for someone in this position? All of these are very acceptable professional answers. You know, I find that if people are really aggressive when it comes to salary, that it could be an indication of the culture of the company, which, you know, may or may not be a red flag. If people are aggressive about asking you salary questions and they want to know, it could be a couple things. One, it could be that the recruiter just has to fill in, she has to check the boxes to make sure she's done her job. And it's something she's required to ask you. Or it could be that this company is really focused on getting people for being as economical as possible. And that's not necessarily that may not be, for me, that would not be something I would look at as a core value that I would want to see in a company. If it is a pre-screen on an online form, do we leave the question blank? Yes. Lila, and then, or is it Leela? I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I apologize.
It's Lila.
Lila, okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Leave it blank. If it's required, you can put NA, you could put 0, you could put 00, comma 000 if it's they make you do a dollar amount, or you could say, you could give them a range of what you want. But always give them the high end of the range. So if you're looking for a job and you know, the range you see, maybe after you do some research for this title is like between $80,000 and $100,000. It doesn't hurt to give them that range. I would probably stay away from saying 80,000 because that's when they're going to say, oh, this person will take this job at the low end. And I would, you know, you may want to put 90. That's a good number in the middle. But me personally, I tend to try to, you know, if there is a range, I try to tend to go higher because you can negotiate that. And there was a question earlier in the presentation about worrying that if you negotiate, the job offer will be reneged. And that does not happen. If it does, it's not a company you want to do business with or work for. But the only thing, I mean, typically what they'll say is we can't match that. And then you can negotiate with other areas, but don't let the fear of not getting the offer taken away keep you from asking for what you want. You will not be rejected because you ask for a salary that they can't accommodate.
Thank you.
Sure. The last thing, I would like to reserve the conversation about pay until we get further in the process. However, is there already an allotted pay range for the position? I think this is probably the best one. Okay, guess what? You got the job. You got some job offers. Yay! You get a job, and you get a job, and you get a job. Do you guys know who Oprah Winfrey is? Anybody? Yeah. She used to do crazy things on her talk show. One time she gave out cars to everybody in the audience. Of course, a lot of people had to give them back because they couldn't afford the taxis. But anyway, so you have a job offer, right? Before you accept an offer, you want to, first of all, you know, give yourself a pat on the back and avoid doing anything immediately. You want to give yourself time to really think about it, and you want to ask the companies for time. Our website has recruiter guidelines for job offers. If a recruiter tries to pressure you into making a quick decision, please let us know, because we can talk to those recruiters about what's called exploding offers, which is against our policy. It's also just, it's in poor form. It's not a good business practice. You want to have open communication, and you could ask the company what their timeline is. You could tell them very politely that you are interviewing with other employers, but you're interested in the position. So you're not going to give them any more information than that, though. And you should only start negotiating with the company that you really want to work for. It looks bad professionally. If you're thinking, yeah, I don't really want to work for this company, but I want to see how much they will pay me. It can get back to other companies. The science world in Southern California is a small world, so you really have to keep your professional brand. And if you decide to take an offer, you don't want to decide, oh yeah, I'm not going to take that offer anymore because someone offered you more money. You typically stop interviewing at other companies once you accept an offer, which I'm sure you guys all know, right? And when you're thinking about an offer, you want to look at more than just salary for the best offer. As Lauren mentioned, medical and dental benefits are very expensive. Vacation and sick time is very important. Retirement benefits, employer matching. This is where I would talk to your friends who work in the finance industry. You can always come talk to us if you have an offer about, you know, what looks fair and reasonable. Retirement benefits are really important. I'm learning this now that I'm a little bit older. So you want to give that a lot of thought. As far as vacation and sick time, a lot of companies will allow you to cash out your vacation time if you leave, but they won't allow you to cash out your sick time. So think about that. And remember those unlimited vacation days. You need to find out what that means in terms of compensation, and will you be paid for those unlimited vacation days should you leave? Is there a number or a cap? Probably not, so think about that. So go back to your budget and kind of plug in some of the other benefits in your budget to see if it helps, if the salary is not exactly what you want, because that may get you to the point where you need to be. And then there's other packages in negotiations that you can look at. For example, professional learning, not that you guys want to go back to school again, but any professional development, maybe conferences, maybe there are perks that I'm not thinking of. All of those things count. And I just obviously mentioned these. Flexible work hours, telecommuting, transportation. UCI has a good transportation, sustainable commuter policy. Job title is important because it means different things at different companies. But typically, if you're trying to move up, you're going to want to make sure that you position yourself through your job title. Obviously, a senior manager is better than a supervisor. A director is better than a senior manager. And you can, you know, a lot of recruiters, when they look at your LinkedIn profile, they will sometimes look at your title. And if they're familiar with the company, they may know, like, okay, this company has a flat organizational hierarchy, meaning everyone is a lead unless they're like a C-suite person, like the CEO or the CFO or the CIO. And so lead might mean that like you're, you know, vice president level. But you need to make sure that when you're looking at the job title, that it's something that you would be proud to have and that would, I guess, be able to propel you forward in your career in the future. And then equipment. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure that you have computer equipment, laptop, you know, cell phone, all those things. Not every company does cell phones. I worked at a company once that gave me 2 cell phones, which was a nightmare. And honestly, having a cell phone that's a work cell phone is kind of a pain, just from personal experience. Anyway, I digress. Think about your walkaway offer. What do you absolutely need in order to accept the offer? Do you guys know what I mean when I say walkaway offer? Like, what's your bottom line? It's the minimum salary that you will accept along with the other benefits. It's what you need to pay your bills and to eat and to have shelter. Think about that. Okay, so when you enter your negotiation, like I said, you don't want to start until you're ready to accept the position. And you want to come from a place of curiosity, not defensiveness. And remember, it's a dialogue. So you want to set up a time to talk. I find those conversations are easier to have on the phone because you can have your notes with you. You don't have to make eye contact. It's easier to have those uncomfortable silences, which you need. You want to be able to have your value statement with you because sometimes that will help you. That can be the difference between, you know, $5,000 in salary, or it can really help you. And that's your best negotiating tool, really. Don't take it personally and check your emotions. People get upset, but it's not personal. Always express gratitude for the offer and time to negotiate. And then you want to follow up in writing. If you get a verbal offer, you want to email the person who offered you, who made the verbal offer, and confirm that exact number in writing. And also, once you have made your case, you want to stop talking. It's really hard. Silence is so uncomfortable, but that's why you need to practice. You could practice with a friend. I wish we had an online tool to do salary negotiation, but this is the kind of the hardest thing, at least for me, is to make your ask, show your value, and then stop talking and wait for them to respond. So let's talk about questions. I know there were some questions before about contract, and should you wait until you have a contract to negotiate your salary? So I kind of wanted to clarify. If you have a contract, your compensation will be listed in the contract. So you won't be able to sign it until you have finalized your salary. You shouldn't until you have that final number. And California is a right to work state, meaning a lot of companies don't do contracts. They do at-will agreements. So you may not have a contract at a company, and that's a whole different presentation, but you may just have like a written agreement. Oftentimes they're called at-will employment agreements. So yeah, you definitely want to get whatever the salary and benefits are in writing before you sign anything. What other questions do you guys have for me? Nitish?
Yeah, I have some questions. Jill, thank you so much for going over all these different aspects. So one thing is related to the range. So you mentioned that we should give it the higher end of the range, right? But what if we don't know what that company is looking for, is offering for that particular role? So it's just good to say negotiable and then use those words, right, which you mentioned.
Yeah, I would go back to those things that those phrases I gave you that, I'm not prepared to talk about this, or can you tell me the range? And then if they won't, then you can use your salary research to give them a range of what you think someone in a comparable position at another similar company would make.
Got it.
Yeah.
And negotiation, is it better via email or phone?
Negotiation, I think it's a personal preference. I like to talk on the phone, but you can do email. I mean, I think most people do negotiations over the phone. Lauren, would you say that's accurate? I mean, if there's
Yeah, I'd say majority of mine have been on the phone, but I definitely have had a handful that they wanted to talk in person. So they were like, oh, this director, she's the one who handles it. Like, we'll schedule a meeting, and I had to go in and meet with like the director to do the salary negotiation. But majority of the time, it's been over the phone for me and what I've seen.
Yeah.
And then you always just follow up in writing, Natisha. So whatever you talked about, whether it was on the phone or in person, so you'll always have that email as well.
Okay. Another question I can close out with this one is, I've seen a lot of companies which offer services for salary negotiation. So what do you think about some companies offer like a fixed rate? Let's say you need to pay them a certain amount, and then for some companies it's like a percentage of your first month salary or second month salary. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on these two different types of models, and if it's even worth eliciting their services.
You lost me at paying a company. Lauren, I see you nodding too. I would not get involved in that. I think you're brilliant, Nitish. You have the skills and you've shown us your value proposition. You can negotiate. I would not pay anyone to help you negotiate your salary.
Got it. Thank you.
Natalie?
Hi, so maybe I missed it, but like let's assume you've got the job offer, you've set up the phone call to negotiate, and you come in with your ask, and two scenarios, one, they come back and they say, you're worth it, that sounds good, we can do that number, that compensation package, and you're happy with it. At that point, do you verbally agree on the phone and then follow up in writing? Or do you say, that sounds great, like, let me still think about it and follow up? What's the recommended?
I would ask them to think about it and then follow it up.
Even if you're like happy with it.
I mean, if yeah, I probably would just give
Okay.
myself a little bit more time.
Okay, that's fine. And then again, similarly, if you're not quite so happy with, even at the end of the negotiation, it's not quite what you're looking for, obviously you can say, thank you, I need to think about it, and then follow up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lauren was gonna say something.
Yeah, you also don't want to accept on the phone because you still need like HR to send you all the details of the total compensation, right? And
Got it.
would still possibly say no to this company if the total compensation is not good, right? So you don't want to verbally accept, like you would just say, I look forward to reviewing the total offer, the total package, and look forward to, connecting with you. You can say, this is all sounding great, and I'm looking forward to reviewing the entire offer.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great point. Yeah. I'm gonna pronounce your name wrong. I'm sorry. Mr. Help me out. Quentin.
Yeah, yeah, you can call me Quinton. Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry.
No, no worries, no worries. This is a tough name. Yeah, I have a question related to the negotiation package, specifically for internationals. I do know, okay, my understanding is that sometimes for international students, you may need to negotiate based on getting a H1B or like getting a green card, for instance. Do you have any idea how maybe companies would actually perceive this, like during the whole negotiation process? Does it make it like harder for international students simply because maybe the company will need to do some additional steps or pay more money to actually hire like those on visa?
I think those two should be separate. To me, that's very unsteady ground, like that can be considered discrimination. So separate the H-1B and the OPT process from the salary. If a company tries to commingle those or bring those together, I think that's a red flag.
Oh, yeah, this is really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. So it's 1 o'clock. I appreciate everyone sticking around for the whole time, and feel free to reach out if you have other questions. Maybe we'll do another one where we do mock salary negotiations. Let Lauren know if you're interested. Yeah. So thanks, everyone. I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks so much, Jill. We really appreciate you coming.
Of course. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.